Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Denver, Colorado. I'm so glad you could join me today. I have just a fun little card for you. It's sort of back to your stash. I'm using stuff out of the main catalog and it is a fun fold. And it's kind of a surprise. I'm using the hand pen suite, and hopefully some of you already have that, and if not, you can certainly order it from me. I'd be thrilled if you selected me as your demonstrator. Also, please subscribe to the channel. It does help me. Thanks, and let's just get started. Okay, here is my card, and I'm using some of the beautiful hand-penned paper in the background, and it has this cutout with the pale papaya, and so I've used the Misty, Moonlight, and the pale papaya on this, and I've made it a birthday card. And then on the inside, when you open it up, this little flap comes down, and there we have what would stand like that. It says love you friend, and then it has this little flower that folds up and then bends down. So it's a little bit of a pop-up, and it sits this way and sits perfectly fine just like that and can be displayed that way, although it's easier for you to see if I turn it up like that. And that's what we're making today, and it's really not a difficult card at all. It's very simple. Let me tell you what you need. I used a basic white base that is 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. This is a standard A2 size card. Then I have 2 pieces of Misty Moonlight that are 4 inches by 5 1/4, one to layer on the front and one to layer on the inside. Then next I have a piece of pale papaya that is 3 3/4 by 5 for the front, and then I have another piece of pale papaya that is 3 3/4 by 8 1/4, and this one is scored at, I believe it's 3 inches. Yes, 3 inches on one side. And that's going to layer on the inside and make our little platform. So that's how that's going to work. Then we need a piece of the designer series paper. This piece needs to be cut down, so it needs to be 3.5 by 4 3/4. Then I have a strip that is 1/2 inch by 5 1/8. Then I have one strip here that is 3 3/4 by 3/4 of an inch. Then you will need a piece of white that is 3 inches by 4 1/2. Then 2 pieces of scrap, one that is, this one I think is 4 by 5 1/4, and this allows you to stamp 2 of these flowers, one going this on this side, one on this side, one for the inside and then one for the outside of the card or the front of the card. Then you need one more piece of whisper white to cut our little lacy border to put our flowers on here and to cut out our sentiment, and that is all you need. Now, the ink that I'm using is Memento, and I'm using Misty Moonlight. So let's just get started. I think the place to start is to do our stamping. So this is photopolymer. Oops. Photopolymer, so I need a cushion. So I'm just going to grab a foam cushion here, and I have my flower from hand penned here, and I have my Memento ink, and I'm just going to ink up my flower and then be very careful to put it as far over on one side as I can. There we go, and get that image down. And there we go. There's one of our flowers. Now, while we're at it, we can just go ahead and re-ink that flower. And this piece of paper at the size that I gave you, 4 by 5 1/4, will easily hold the 2 flowers that we're going to put down here. And there you go. So that is what I did. And then I colored these, and then I cut them out with the dies. So what I used was the hand penned bundle, which is the hand pen suite. This is the flower that I used. And then in the dies, the penned flower dies, I used this outline to cut out those flowers. And that's all I did with those. Now my sentiment, my happy birthday and my love you friend, came from a different stamp set. This one is Shaded Summer, and there are dies to this one. In fact, the dies are part of the celebration this time. You can get the dies to cut out these images and then some other flowers. But I love this happy birthday and then love you friend. So I took my 2 from this one, Shaded Summer. All right, so next, what I did was I used my blends and colored my flowers. Now, what I did on this one is I colored these leaves in blue, and I decided I wasn't quite as crazy about that as I thought I would be, although this paper definitely has leaves in the blue, but they're lighter and darker and so on and so forth. So on the inside of this one, we don't really have a garden green, but I thought the light shaded spruce did just fine. So I'm going to do these in light shaded spruce. So what I have are pale and dark pale papaya, and then I have light pumpkin pie, and then I have the light shaded spruce. And those are the ones I'm going to show you coloring one, and I've already colored mine and they're ready to go, so just to save some time. So the very first thing I did was I used my light pale papaya and I colored all of my flowers. And I'll speed through this because there's nothing special about this. It's just getting that pretty pale papaya color down on the flowers. And then I used the darker pale papaya to come back and add some accent color to the flowers. And then I used my light pumpkin pie to color the centers. Then I used my light shaded spruce, and on this one I didn't even mind if it had a little bit of white on the edges. I just wanted to get some color down, and it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I think it's kind of pretty if it's not. So I'll speed through this. Okay, that is what I did to color my flowers, and I did 2 of them, one for the outside and one for the inside. And for this card, I colored both sets of leaves with the light shaded spruce. So here are my pieces that I have done ahead of time. And on my sentiment, I just did that on a piece of scrap paper. And this time I did one in black and one in the Misty Moonlight. And we'll just see which one works better on the card. So once you have these done, I think I'd like to show you this piece. This was the piece that's 3 inches by 4.5. And that makes the mechanism that holds our little flower inside. This one is scored at 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, and 4 inches. And then all we're going to do is burnish those score lines really well. So this, and you want to make sure that your piece is square, so making sure that the top and the bottom are square to the underneath piece when you do your burnishing. so that we end up with a square instead of some funky shape here. Okay, so there we go. That's that score line, and then this last score line. And that is all there is. We've made this almost little larger lipstick tube, if you will. And this flap is what's going to hold this piece together and make our mechanism that allows the card to open and pop up our flower on the inside. So for this, I'm going to bring out my silicone mat and my seal, because I want something nice and strong to cover my flap. So what I'm going to do is put my seal a couple of times down this strip. And then it's just a matter of folding this strip and folding this over. And once I've got that folded over, I'm going to burnish it one last time, like that. And then I'm going to put some seal on, well, let's wait and do that after I've got my pieces put together. So the next thing we can do is to add some of our layers here. The first thing we can do is add our Misty Moonlight to the front and the inside of the card. So just centered with a similar border around the inside, and the same thing on the outside. Okay, then for the outside piece, we have our piece of pale papaya, which is going to go down centered on my piece of Misty Moonlight. Then we are going to take our piece of white and run it through our Stitch So Sweetly die to get this piece, and then put down our Designer Series paper. Our Designer Series paper piece is 3.5 by 4 3/4, and that's going to go down here, centered on this piece. I know it's a lot of layers, but I just love layers, can't help myself. So this piece is the one we cut with the Stitch So Sweetly die, and it's the largest of the scalloped dies. And I'm going to center that on here, and then I'm going to take one of my flowers here, and I'm going to raise it on dimensionals. And then arrange this on here, and I'm going to center that down a little bit more to the bottom, because I want to put my sentiment. I was happiest with it up here at the top, and I think I do like the blue. Yes, I like the blue much better than the black. So I'm going to, let's just see what we need here. We need a big dimensional on this side, and it looks like we need a small dimensional on this upper corner here, if I'm right. Yep, that looks like that'll work just fine. So we're going to take our happy birthday, and I just cut my little piece of scrap to fit the sentiment. You could certainly use a die that gives you a little bit different look. In fact, the small scallop die from this Stitch So Sweetly would be very pretty. But there is my happy birthday. And then for the inside, we're ready for this piece. Now, this piece is going to go on just as though it were going to fit like the one on the front, except the way we scored this one at 5 1/8, it comes all the way to the bottom of the blue piece. And that's going to hide the fact that there's this layer from the front of the card, and it'll still do exactly what we want it to. So we're just going to set this in place as though it were a smaller piece, and set that in place, and it automatically makes our little floor here on the inside of our card. Now, I have my stamp that says, oh, love you, friend, is what it says. And I'm going to do that one in the Misty Moonlight as well. And this one is a red rubber, so we don't need any cushion on this one. And I'm just going to attempt, pardon my head if I get it in the shot, I just want to get this one straight on my panel. It says, love you, friend. Then we have our strips. This little strip is going to go all the way across here, and we'll get a little bead of snail on it. I'm going to use my dot runner on that little strip and put that in place with a very tiny border on this end. And I want to make sure that yep, it looks like it needs to be trimmed off just a tiny bit so that it won't impede the folding of the card. So I'm just going to snip off, that can't be a 32nd of an inch. Just enough to let the card close properly. There we go. Now we have our mechanism here, and where we want it to stick, I'm going to go back to where I've got my seam. My seam is right here, so that's the part I'm going to put right in the back. Now this I want centered on here, and I need it to stick on this side, and got black ink on me. I need it to stick on this side and this side. So I'm going to put my seal on the side that has my seam, and I'm going to put seal on that side and seal on this side. It's going to be a very sticky thing. And then I'm going to partially close this and set this inside just a tiny bit above that score line, because I don't want this to be so bulky that it stops this from closing. So up just a little bit, stick it in place, and then close this piece over the top. Run my bone folder across the bottom of that just to get it right. And there we've got our piece that opens and makes our floor for the inside of our card here. There we go. And I did manipulate that back and forth to get it to be exactly the way I want it. And then all we have to do is take this lovely little piece and decide how we want it on here, maybe like that, and stick that on our little box here. So I'm going to, let's see, it looks like it needs to be from this little flower over. So I'm going to start with some of this, and then I'm going to add some of my regular seal here and get that piece covered and put that into place right here, just down along that edge. And there we've got the little surprise pop-up on the inside of our card. Now we have one last little piece of designer series paper, which I cut 3 3/4 by 3/4 of an inch so that it would fit across the bottom here and continue our decoration from the front. So on this one, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a snail here and put that in place with a tiny little border across the bottom there. And there we go. There is our surprise pop-up card. So now embellishments. So what I ended up using was from our holiday rhinestone pieces. get rid of a little bit of this stuff here. We don't need any of that any longer. I was surprised that this worked, but these pumpkin pie rhinestones work absolutely perfectly. So I put a couple of the medium ones in the center of these two largest flowers, and I don't know whether it's because they pick up the color underneath, but they look like a perfect match, and yet I know they're darker. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And then I put a small one in this larger flower, and then I dotted a couple more around the card. So one down here and one that I put on my sentiment right up here. And I've been thinking about it, and I think I'm going to add one more on the inside of my card right up here next to my love you friend. So there we go. Isn't that just pretty? I'm really tickled with the way these came out. So that is my project for the day. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I think I'm going to call this card Surprise Pop-Up Card. A happy birthday surprise pop-up card. And I wanted to go back and do Back to Your Stash because I want you to get as much as you possibly can out of the stamps and paper that you already own. It's not always just about the new. It's about using some of the material we have. And you'll have to tell me if you don't mind the blue flowers, or would you rather have them be the green since I can't match this. I suppose I could have just used my garden green marker instead of a blend on here, and then it would have matched perfectly. But I think that one worked out okay. So, but you'll have to tell me whether the blue flowers bothered you or whether you're happier with the green flowers. I'd love to know what you think. So that's it for me. Let's see, this is August, so my prize for August is a $60 shopping spree on me. And how you get yourself in the drawing is to put an order of any size on my store, lbedinger.stampinup.net. You can get to it through my blog, www.ink and Ingenuity. All of the instructions and the measurements and the materials that I used for these cards are listed right below the video. Click on the Show More or the down arrow. And also down there is the subscribe button. Please subscribe to my channel, and if you push the bell, you can be notified every time I put up a video. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll be back soon with more cards, more projects, and more tips. Bye!